Good morning, everybody. My name is Isabel Crome, and you're joining us here at the Temple SBDC for our webinar on Introduction to AI for your small business. So we're so pleased you've joined us. A couple of quick housekeeping notes before we begin. We are in a meeting style Zoom, which means that if you go off mute, we will be able to hear you. This is really great. You'll be able to ask questions and hear answers. But it does mean, since there are a few of us, I'm going to ask everybody to stay off mute or to stay on mute, stay muted, unless you're asking a question, just to minimize kind of the background noise and disruptions. If you'd like to have your camera on, you're very welcome to. It's always lovely to see faces and not just be talking to a void, but no pressure. We understand it is first thing in the morning. So however you'd like to have your camera is fine by me. It's always nicer to see faces though. So thank you, Charisse. So I'm going to ask everybody to stay muted unless you're asking a question. As we go on, if you'd like to put a question privately to me, you can put that in the chat, and you can just send it to me, and then it'll go just to me and not necessarily to everybody. And questions are very welcome. So as I'm going through this, if there's terminology I use that you're not familiar with, if I'm speaking too quickly, if we lose audio, anything like that happens, let me know. You can put that right in the chat, and I'll see it and I'll respond accordingly. If you haven't used Zoom in a little while, I'm going to send a quick message in the chat, so you'll see that pop up. There's a little red little alert that pops up on your Zoom controls to help you find the chat. And because we have a nice group this morning, we've got about, just under 20 folks, and we will probably have more people joining us. Feel free to introduce yourselves. If you are in business for yourself and your target market includes other small business owners, I got a room full of them here. So say hi. Feel free to drop, a website, a LinkedIn link, however you want to connect. I invite you to do so in the chat. Because what would a small business webinar be without just a little bit of networking, right? All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started talking about AI for your small business today. And we are, of course, here at the Temple University Small Business Development Center. My name is Isabel Crum. I'm the Associate Director here at the SBDC. And Temple SBDC has been serving small businesses in the greater Philadelphia area for over 40 years. We do this as part of a statewide and nationwide network of small business development centers. We're very proud to be part of that network. You can see some statistics about our nationwide network's impact along the bottom of that screen. And we assist small businesses in two major ways through our no-cost small business consulting, and we'll talk more about how to utilize those services if you're interested in taking advantage of them at the end of our webinar. We also, of course, offer webinars, trainings, in-person educational events, just like this webinar on artificial intelligence. So we are going to be adding new webinars to our calendar, every couple weeks. Keep an eye on that. Sign up for our newsletter to hear about all the exciting things that we're doing. And with that, here's a little bit about me if you're curious. I've been working with the Temple SBDC since 2021. Before that, I ran a women's business center. Before that, I had my own small business. So I've been working with small businesses for, depending on if you include my own small business experience, about 15 years, and as a consultant for about 10. So I really love my work. I love my job. And artificial intelligence, AI, is one of my favorite topics. So I'm excited to talk about that today. Here's what we're trying to accomplish today. I always like to start with our learning objectives. What are we trying to do? While I go through these, I'm going to run a quick poll because I'd love to know who's in the room. So I'm just going to ask you a quick question. Are you already in business? No wrong answers. Just knowing that we're targeting small business owners. I always like to know how many folks do we have who are operational, not yet operational. I'm not running a business. I'm just here to learn. Again, no wrong answer. It just helps me understand who we got in the room. Our learning objectives today are to understand how generative AI works. In broad terms, this isn't going to be a very technical webinar, and also to learn about what risks does utilizing AI come with for my business. And my major goal is I want you to leave today with at least one viable use case for your business and a good understanding of where it can support your business and how to get the most out of this emerging technology. All right, most of you have participated in my poll, so thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and wrap that poll. If you're curious, we've got a nice mix today. We've got about half of us are already operating in the existing business, lots of folks in the planning stages, and lots of folks just here to learn more about AI. So fabulous. Again, as a reminder, if you're just joining us, I'm asking everybody to stay muted unless you're asking a question. I welcome your questions, though, very much welcome. And you can put your questions in the chat, or you can come off mute and ask them if you'd like to. So here's what our objectives are today. Let's get into it. All right, so if you could just, do you all know how to use the hand raise feature on Zoom? I'd love you to raise your hand if you already have an account with a generative AI platform like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Copilot, any of the above. Thank you. I see one person has raised their hands. Anybody else have an existing account? Like you've got, your own ChatGPT account or your own, Claude, Gemini, etc. Awesome. Okay, that's helpful. Great. And I'm asking because we may do some breakout rooms and some kind of hands-on work if time permits. So it's helpful to know, who would be able to participate directly in that. Awesome. So a nice mix. Thank you very much. You can put your hands down. All right. So once again, coming back to the topic of the day, introduction to AI for your small business. I want to start, and this is a little bit of a joke title, but I want to start by making the case for why you should care about this, why this matters, why generative AI matters for your small business. So here are some statistics that I've pulled from a variety of surveys in the last 6 months or so. The thing is, 98% of small businesses that have been surveyed are already using AI-enabled tools. Maybe they're platforms you already use that have AI integration. 40% are using generative AI directly themselves. 91% of small business owners believe that AI will fuel your future growth. And um, many businesses surveyed reported productivity increases through AI use of between 27 and 133%. So that means that the small business owners surveyed who thought that AI made them more productive thought that it made them a fair amount more productive. Um, but there's a big gap. A lot of small business employees do not feel confident in their AI skills. And those who received training, 90% thought that it improved their work and made them more effective or more efficient in their work. So whether it's you as a small business owner or your employees, there is value in learning how to utilize these tools. And 100% of Fortune 500 companies are now using or experimenting with AI. And so small business owners cannot afford to lag behind the largest players in our industries. What do small business owners say who've already, dipped their toe in the water and are using AI? One, frequent response to surveys is that AI can offer small, medium enterprises, that's what that means, small and medium enterprises, shortcuts that can yield quick productivity wins. So this could be, planning your staff schedules using AI. So that's one fewer, complicated administrative task that you need to do. Reducing food wastage in a small restaurant. And a lot of these are pretty simple to enact, not very expensive, and can make a big impact. There's a gift shop owner who was surveyed who said, I always said that I need an extra me working on the business. And AI is kind of like a mini me that I can get to sort of start me off and just make things a bit easier. And you'll hear me say this over and over again. I don't believe that any generative AI is a silver bullet. It's gonna change your life. It's gonna make everything so much easier. I think in general, these tools should be utilized with keeping a human in the loop, a person. We should be using these to augment our staff, not replace our staff. But let me do a quick demo for those of you who have not used these platforms before and show you what they can do. So I've got my and I use a couple of different generative AI services. I've tried just about all of them. Today I'm going to do a demo in ChatGPT just because it's often the most kind of widely utilized. Can you all see my screen? Okay, fantastic. Do me a favor and tell me, somebody put in the chat a business idea. And we're going to have AI draft us a business plan or the beginnings of a business plan. And I can pull one from the existing businesses that are here. Funny Pet T-shirts, coffee and pastry shop. Okay, awesome. I'm going to say, let's go with, I saw Funny Pet T-shirts first, so let's do this. Okay, so I'm starting a Funny Pets T-shirt company and need a business plan. My business is based in Philadelphia and will operate as an e-commerce drop shipping company, selling nationwide. I have identified my vendor and the shirts will cost me $4 to make and I will sell them for 25. Please draft an executive summary for my business plan and ask clarifying questions. Let me pretend like I can spell. So I've done a couple of things in this prompt that I'll explain later. But for now, let's just see what it gives us. So I never gave it a business name, so that's a big one. It doesn't know what to call the business. Business structure LLC, which it guessed. Okay, anybody unable to see the shared screen? Can you all see the shared screen? Can everybody see the screen? Okay. So this is just the executive summary. Sorry about that, Claudia. Hopefully you'll be able to kind of follow along. So they've talked about the business overview, market opportunity, including some industry research, products and pricing, marketing strategy, mission statement, financial outlook, clarifying questions. And if I answered these questions, and it would then generate a much more accurate executive summary, right? But let's say my business name will be Funny Pets. And this is a terrible business name, but I'm just picking it out of a hat. And I have a $200 per month marketing budget for pay-per-click campaigns and have secured a domain and built out a Shopify storefront. Please draft me a marketing plan, including campaign taglines and timelines for the next 3 months. All right, so I've given it some additional info, and now it's going to build me out a marketing plan. It's got some sample taglines. It's got some hashtags I could use, marketing objectives split out by month, including some key metrics that I should be tracking, and then channel strategy, where to allocate that budget, what to do with it, including, again, funny keywords, sample ad copy, things to be doing broken down by week. And I hear you on this comment about how to make sure whatever generated is true. And I agree that some of these claims about facts that it's made up here should be fact checked before I put them into a plan. This market, this industry, size number, and the t-shirt market, those facts are definitely things that should be fact checked. And and we will talk a lot about the potential risks um, of going straight from generative AI content. But I just wanted to show you how little I've given it and how much it's given me. Now, if I'm going to open a new chat. Let's say I gave it none of that info. I am opening a pet t-shirt company. Write my business plan. Now I want you to notice I gave it a lot less information, and it's going to give me the same kind of stuff, but it's going to be much less relevant to me, right? Because I haven't given it enough detail to write something that is relevant. So it's making some assumptions about what I'm doing. Owner matching shirts. That's not what I'm doing. It's given me a very different number for the clothing market size. So again, we got to fact check all of that. Um, and it's giving me very similar kind of marketing and sales strategy, operations plan. But it's making some assumptions that I'm going to be manufacturing my t-shirts or printing them myself. It's giving me there's a fair amount of information that it is filling in through pure assumptions, and unless I've given it the information that's accurate to my business, I couldn't take this plan to a funder. A lot of that in there doesn't reflect what I actually want to do with my t-shirt company. So let's just process this a little bit, but I wanted to start. I always like to start with a demo. I'm going to go back to my slide deck and show you how we got there. And do me a favor, if you are not on mute, and just stay on mute for me if you would, unless you're asking me questions. Yeah. So a lot of people talking in the chat about the importance of fact checking, and I could not agree more. So let's talk about how we get some of these incorrect facts. That is absolutely true. How do we get some of these incorrect facts, and how can we still utilize this technology while bearing in mind that there is a pretty significant risk of, things going wrong. So we're going to approach that conversation by first going back to our first learning objective, which is how does generative AI technology work in general? So first of all, generative AI is not, HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey. No one's going to keep you from opening those pod bay doors. Not at this point. We're not giving AI that much control over things. Nor is AI an entity with feelings, knowledge, or common sense. It doesn't know anything fundamentally. It has no emotions. It doesn't like you or dislike you. And it also doesn't have any common sense. It'll absolutely tell you, given the right prompts, it'll tell you that up is down and down is up. It has no, it's not able to do its own kind of fact checking. It's also not magic, and it's not resource free. Running an AI model uses processing power, memory, uses electricity, uses, water to cool data centers. It uses resources. So, okay, that's all the stuff it's not. What is it, right? So AI is the science of creating machines capable of performing tasks that would typically require human intelligence. That's like the definition in a dictionary of artificial intelligence. The concept dates back to at least the 50s, arguably even earlier if you think about thinking machines that and computer machines that were sketched out in the late 1900s. But the concept, has been a subject of study since at least the middle of the 20th century. Early AI relied on rule-based systems, so every scenario and response were mapped out. Think of like those punch card systems that IBM had in the 50s. And in the 80s, we began to think about machine learning with the goal of helping computers learn from data rather than relying on pre-programmed rules. So rather than explicitly telling a system how to recognize patterns, machine learning algorithms are trained on large data sets, and they develop their own methods for identifying trends or making predictions. This shift in like the 90s and the aughts was revolutionary. It enabled systems to improve over time and adapt to new information without needing to have every single input and output pre-programmed. It would do that itself. So applications like spam filters, recommendation engines, speech recognition all became possible thanks to machine learning. And that, is the basis of a lot of technology that we use today, YouTube suggestions, the entire business model of Netflix, basically. All these are, possible through machine learning. A major breakthrough in machine learning came with the development of neural networks, and that's that little diagram I've got over there. Neural networks are algorithms that are inspired by the structure of the human brain, and they consist of layers of interconnected nodes or neurons that process information by mimicking how neurons in your brain communicate. So while neural networks were conceptualized in the early days of AI in the mid-century, they didn't really gain traction until the 2000s because we didn't have the computing power and the data availability to allow for their widespread use. When you think about these things combined, you get deep learning, which is a subset of machine learning, and that builds on neural networks by using many layers to analyze complex data, which makes advancements like image recognition and natural language processing possible. These were breakthroughs that happened, 10, 15 years ago at this stage. So generative AI is one of the latest frontiers in AI. That's going to be our main focus today. Generative AI involves creating new content generation, right? Like text, images, music, video, based on patterns learned from existing data. So this is the one thing I want you to walk away with. AI algorithms, generative AI algorithms have to be trained on something. They are trained extensively in all kinds of content. Think of them as supercharged autocomplete. Their goal is to create something new based on what you're asking for and based on the patterns that the AI model has observed in its own training data. So they're not pulling it from thin air, and they're basing all of this on their training data and on the prompt you're giving them. So to Michael's point, garbage in, garbage out. If you use a crappy prompt, you're going to get a crappy output. And supercharged autocomplete is my favorite kind of way of describing what they're doing. They're designed to make something that looks right, not something that is correct, right? They have no basis to judge correct. They can only judge, does this look, you wanted a contract. Does this look like contracts I've been trained on before? Yes, it does. That's the end of their kind of fact checking or quality assurance process. This looks right. You're going to go with it. You as a human are the person who's asking for this output. It's incumbent on us to fact check and make sure that that contract passes legal muster before we use it in a real world setting. And again, thank you, Michael. Different models are trained on different methods and data. So so one model might be better than another in a specific use case. And yeah, Claude for code is a great example of that. So as I said, generative AI can be used to create all different kinds of media. And the biggest breakthrough recently that we've seen is the video AI that Google Gemini has the ability to create really realistic looking videos. We're going to focus today primarily on large language models, which are text-based generative AI, and we'll call them LLMs for short. Before we do that, let's review a couple of these other examples of generative AI and how we might use them in your business. Image-based generative AI, most of the major LLMs in the market, your ChatGPT, and others, your Geminis, can create images as well, and but different tiers or subscription levels on those platforms might limit how many images you can create at a time. But let's say you want to use image-based generative AI in your business. You could use this to create images for marketing purposes or to illustrate other documents or presentations or reports. Audio-based generative AI can be used to, there are really, really advanced natural speech AI tools that can read a script and sound like a voice actor. So creating voiceovers for video content like ads, social media videos, educational content, etc., is easier than ever. And there's no need to necessarily hire a voice actor. As long as you're comfortable with the quality of the natural speech AI tool. Video-based generative AI, again, there've been some major breakthroughs. However, the technology for video-based generative AI still requires very detailed prompts to get to a video that, does what you want it to do. A lot of people are stacking generative AI platforms, like using ChatGPT to create the detailed prompt that you need to input into the the video AI so that you can get the output that you're looking for. Code-based generative AI, somebody mentioned code-based Gen AI earlier. These exist and can really, if you are not a coder, there are sites that will create code based on your prompts, to build apps or websites without any coding skills. Again, there's these are not perfect. According to the software engineers in my life, they can be great learning tools for people who want to learn to code and can help an amateur coder work like a pro, but be careful with launching, an app that you built entirely using these coding AI tools. This is how we have, security breaches, like ones you may have heard of in the news. It's always a good idea to have, to quality control with somebody who's got real technical expertise in what you're building. Um, Music-based generative AI, you can create soundtracks for video content or audio content. There are tons of AI-powered features that are integrated into existing platforms. Can anybody think of a platform that you use that already has a generative AI feature built in? We're in one right now.
CapCut.
I didn't hear that. Can you say that one more time? CapCut, sure, absolutely. Definitely. Yeah, that's a great example. We will absolutely provide a copy of the deck after the session. So you'll get a copy. Canva, Photoshop, Word. Yeah, basically every platform that we use has AI integrations at this point. There's also non-generative AI options, visual sorting, categorization. If you have a business where you're doing any kind of manufacturing or any kind of sorting, categorization, there's really interesting non-generative AI tools that might you know make your business more efficient or more productive. So again, we're going to focus on text-based large language models for the rest of the presentation, but I just wanted to highlight some of these other options. And don't forget that you can stack these. That's where the power really is. So if you need ideas for what kind of images to generate, if you need to support writing a more detailed prompt to create to input into a code generator or a video generator, you can use a large language model to craft that prompt. And there's all kinds of interesting ways to stack these and use the output from one as an input for another. But let's talk about large language models. So again, and I've emphasized this a couple of times, pre-trained large language models don't have any insight into what's really going on in your business beyond what you give them in your prompt. And this is less and less true, but as these tools improve. But I have been thinking about them as kind of enthusiastic interns. They don't know they have a lot of academic or theoretical information, but they don't know what's going on in the real world or what's going on in your real business. Um, and there's two major components of the model itself that matter to its usability and that you can use to distinguish or decide between different LLMs out there. Its model or the algorithm itself, so that ChatGPT 5 versus ChatGPT 4, etc. And its training data sets, how it's trained, what it's trained on. And generative AIs form neural networks to speed run immense calculations because they're predicting the next, based on the text that's previously been generated, they're guessing, the text that's going to come next. And it's at the end of the day, it's math. It's very, very complex math. But again, their goal is to make content that looks right. Now, the difference between looks right and is right, for certain kinds of content, it's pretty immaterial, right? If I want a marketing strategy, and I've got a kind of business that has had, that's been written about all over, the e-commerce marketing strategies have been written about so much on the internet that ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini will be able to create a marketing strategy for your e-commerce business that looks right. And the difference between looking right and being right for that kind of content is pretty small. Whereas if I said, hey, ChatGPT, I'm, planning an expansion on my house. Can you draw up engineering drawings for what my house should look like? The difference between looking right and being right in that context, pretty large. Um, so I would probably not rely on those drawings if when I go to do my renovation, right? So that would be an example of a prompt to not rely on ChatGPT for. Um, and you saw me demo this. So LLMs are made to understand natural language, so they're pretty easy to interact with. You ask, you enter them, you give them prompts. That's what the language that you give them is called. You saw me typing that. So all the words I put into ChatGPT, those are my prompts, and you can enter them by typing, or you can talk to the model. All of these will have, a voice control that you can download and talk to. The ChatGPT app, you can talk right to it, and it'll put the prompt in. And what they produce is called an output. It'll create, it'll something in response to the prompt you've given it. And then you can, in that same thread, you can ask for changes or edits, and then ask it to be remade. And so that kind of iterative conversation will eventually result in the output that you want. And there you are. That's how LLMs work. Um, yeah, a couple of good suggestions there. Um, you know, don't use it to create a legal brief for an impending lawsuit. That would be not a great idea. Um, yeah, there's a couple of really interesting ways to improve quality. Templates and examples. Yeah, providing it with templates and examples of what you wanted to create. Multi-shot prompting would be a really effective way to improve the quality of the output. If I were trying to, create a large language model that was really good at writing business plans, I might give it an example, a couple of really great examples of business plans, and a template, and ask it to follow that template in its outputs. And that might improve the quality of what I'm getting, or at least give it the, um, you know, if I want it to write an email that sounds like me, I should provide a few examples of emails that I wrote myself, so that it understands my tone and my way of my writing style and things like that. And I love the suggestion, cross-check using the same prompt across another model. And it's another great way. We're going to move into talking about risks in just a moment. Before we do, I have a feeling you guys are going to be really good at this. I'm going to do a quick myth busting exercise. So I'd love, and you can come off chat if you'd like, if you can come off mute and just ask. I'd love if we're going to start with this first one. I gave you a gimme. Does AI know everything? Thumbs up, thumbs down, false. Yeah, great. Okay, false. Yeah, no. Even worse, it knows nothing, right? Because it isn't sentient. It has no way of knowledge. It's only as up to date as the content it's been trained on, and whatever prompts you're giving it, it doesn't know anything. Is ChatGPT basically Google? True or false? Yes or no?
False.
Yeah, yeah. You can use it like Google, technically, but you shouldn't. Google already has a built-in AI summary. And you run the risk, if you're using ChatGPT like Google, of relying on a hallucination, which is what it's called when an AI model makes up something to get closer to that looking right standard that it uses. So, or a poorly sourced fact, right? A fact that it pulled off of, a not credible website. So don't use ChatGPT like Google. Use Google like Google, or another search engine like Google. Um, and plus, ChatGPT, as we'll talk about in a second, is very energy intensive to use. Let's use the tools that they, in the way that they were designed to use. I wouldn't use ChatGPT like Google. Is ChatGPT bad at math? Yeah, this one's true. Yeah. Um, It's actually, most LLMs are really terrible at arithmetic and counting. In most of the current mainstream LLMs, this has been patched. They've been updated with arithmetic engines. So you can say, what's 3 plus 3, and it'll give you 6. But in general, these are language models. They were not designed to run, to run complex math. If I gave it here's an algebra equation, solve it, it won't do a great job at that. That's not really what they're for. So basic math is kind of a weak spot for a lot of these. Um, Now, a lot, there are large language models that have data analytics engines that have been trained to analyze data sets. So they can do that. But that's a little bit different than in your prompt typing in, 1 + 1 equals what, right? There was a meme that, a year and a half ago, maybe, count the number of R's in the word strawberry, and it would always say, there's 2 R's in strawberry. Well, as it happens, how many R's are there in strawberry? There's 3, not 2. And so, for a while, you could kind of trick your preferred large language model into making a math mistake. And that I think that's still possible, but they've patched a couple of the major ones that people were doing. So yeah, not great at basic arithmetic. That's not what they're for. They're language models. They're not really made to do basic math. Here's a tough one. Will AI take all our jobs? Okay. Ooh, we have some disagreement. We mostly knows, mostly knows. Um, so I think there's no getting around. There have been several layoffs recently explicitly attributed to AI implementation. I think it'll hit different industries at different times. The biggest threat is certainly people who are good at using AI rather than AI itself directly. That said, in some industries, customer support, that's chatbots now, right? So that there are some real reductions in the workforce in certain industries. Um, and I think there's no doubt that AI will change how we work. While it can automate some tasks, it also creates new jobs. The future of work is really probably going to look like humans leveraging AI assistants, not AI doing the work directly. Because as we've talked about and as we will talk about, um, there are real questions around kind of the quality um, and the effectiveness. So yeah, automation and robotics have already replaced a lot of jobs. There was a really interesting study that came out around the risk factors for various jobs and AI replacement. And there are certain elements, certain professions where you can't get around that a human needs to be there because there's, a physical presence required, right? It's not going to take out our trash. It's not going to clean our houses, right? Angela, you're right. Um, However, if phone banks, um, probably going to see, fewer companies opening with, the in the industry of providing phone banks because that's a place where there can be a pretty effective AI replacement. But if you're concerned, is my job one of those that are at risk? Um, do a little bit of Googling and you can probably find the article that I'm thinking about that talks about the risk factors for various roles. Um, and find those that are kind of considered less at risk of being replaced by AI. And really, in almost every role, learning how to use these tools is going to make you more effective and more efficient and less likely to be replaced by an AI. Last one is AI generated content easy to spot. This one's a little bit less clear cut. Yeah, not always, not always. I would say 2 years ago, very easy to spot. Very easy. Less and less so. Um, it used to be, the first AI generated image that really got me where I was like, that's real, was probably a year ago. AI images and AI videos are harder and harder to spot. There are tells, but they're harder to spot. Um, AI generated language, especially large chunks of AI generated language, most of us can clock that a mile away, right? Um, and a lot of times it's that I read probably 10 or 15 business plans a week, and I can tell you from the first page whether it was generated with AI or not. And I'm not necessarily making a value judgment there, but it is pretty easy to spot the big, long, unedited chunks of AI generated language. And you're right that AI still has problems with hands and feet. Less and less true, though. Mostly in the video engines, you can see, that like this hand doesn't remain in the same position, across the whole shot, or you kind of will move in a way that's not natural. But in images, the rule for a long time, or for a relatively long time, was count the number of fingers, check the hands so the hands look right. They've improved. It's a lot harder to tell. So, all right. Those are the myths I wanted to bust. Let's talk now about what you can do with it, and then we'll get into the risks. So marketing. Marketing is the major place where I see a lot of folks using AI. I love it for doing, just getting us a little bit of a start on market research. I wouldn't use it as your sole market research source, but it can help you, guide questions and find good sources. I think it's great for marketing strategy, planning your marketing and sales efforts, generating some of that content. You saw that great marketing plan it made me for the Funny Pets t-shirt business, and especially AI enhanced CRMs. Any kind of technology that tracks customers and prospects. The AI enhancements make those so much more effective and so much better. Um, I see a lot of people doing this, which I really love, the train your own mentor. Take an AI model and train it up, give it a lot of information about your company and your business and where you'd like to go, so that you can ask it questions and have it answer from an informed place, knowing your company and who you have and what roles and what your goals are and you know what you're doing. Um, in contracting, if any of you in the room are in a business where you respond to a lot of RFPs, I really like using ChatGPT to analyze and review RFPs. If I need to make a quick go or no go, do I respond to this or not, kind of a judgment, rather than reading a 20 or a 30 or a 40-page RFP. I can plug it into ChatGPT and say, here's what my company does. Does this, does this uh, RFP look like a fit for our company or not? Highlight the evaluation criteria, the key deadlines, the response, the notes, the responses that it's asking for, to make you a little bit quicker at getting to that go or no go point. Also can be helpful in outlining or punching up proposals. I would not use it to draft your proposal, not whole cloth, right? Because again, AI generated content is pretty visible to folks who read a lot of the same kinds of content. You can really tell. And then content creation. So AI can create pretty realistic images, pretty realistic videos, or narration to accompany the work products that you're developing. For operations, scheduling and other logistics can be enhanced using either a custom trained AI or out-of-the-box tools that are already on the market. And in customer service, there are so many services that will train an AI chatbot to function as your customer service agent. Super important to make sure that you've got the right quality controls in place, that you've got, that the AI chatbots are trained to escalate anything beyond a very standard concern to a human, so that you can provide quality customer support. But there are some great opportunities there. Um, and yeah, nice tip, feed the response back into another model to get a quick fact check or improvement. Yeah, I love those cross-checking. Okay, so we've kind of danced around this a little bit as we've gone through, but let's talk more explicitly about the risks and ethical concerns of utilizing AI. All right, so one of the big ones I'm going to start with is privacy. The freemium models And a lot of these large language models have a freemium option where you can start with a no cost membership or subscription and then pay for, more tokens, more images, whatever at a better model down the road. What you put in is generally going to be used as training data unless you opt out. So I wouldn't put, if you're going back to that train your own mentor, I would not do that unless you've got a closed environment that you've paid for. And generally you'll be paying for a closed environment. You don't want to ever put customer, personal identifying information into an AI model unless it's a closed environment, because then you're putting that customer information out into, now it's OpenAI's or Anthropic's or Google's. You may want to consider paying for access to a closed environment where your prompts and data will not be shared. If you're in an industry like healthcare where you need to be HIPAA compliant, you want to make sure that any AI tools that you use or where you're putting any kind of sensitive data are HIPAA compliant. Generally, the large language models on the market are not going to be HIPAA compliant. You're going to want to, shop around for that. Another big concern, we've talked about this a couple of times, accuracy and quality. That's the big one that is the major practical concern for a lot of us. And going back to that, AI models as enthusiastic interns, would you take an intern's investment advice? Would you take an intern's engineering tips? It can be a good starting place, but unless you have the subject matter expertise to validate, is this accurate or not accurate? You want to do some cross-checking, feed that response back into another model to get a quick fact check, as Michael suggests, or ask it for sources, ask it for, why is this a good idea? Ask some probing questions on it, especially on anything critical in its recommendations. We want to basically trust but verify. Um, and it's one of those things where if I'm sure we can all think of the kind of person who is an expert on everything, self-identified expert on everything, no matter what you ask them about, they know something about it. And maybe they seem really credible until they start talking about the area of expertise that you have, right? Let's say you're a registered nurse and this person it sounds like they know what they're talking about when they talk about marketing or when they talk about economics or when they talk about, technology. But they start talking about medical stuff and you're like, that's not true. That's not right. That's not what that's for. I guarantee you there are similar gaps in their knowledge in those other areas. You just can't hear them because that's not your subject matter expertise. So be very wary of technical advice that you cannot verify yourself, and legal advice, especially anything beyond a very standard boilerplate, you know, um, uh, uh, piece of advice. I would not rely on an AI for legal advice, generally speaking. I would not rely on an AI for engineering advice. You get the picture. Anything technical, if you don't have the subject matter expertise to verify it and validate that output, don't take it as gospel. Um, so that's one of the risks, and the way that we mitigate it is we fact check. Another big risk, plagiarism or copyright infringement. Intellectual property and generative AI is a big old gray area. We have not yet, this is not a settled question in the world. Um, but there is a big risk especially if you're using it for image generation, that it'll include in the image that's generated some copywritten or otherwise protected content. So for instance, let's say I wanted to use ChatGPT to design some t-shirts, some Philadelphia themed t-shirts. And I said, design me a t-shirt that incorporates some quintessentially Philadelphia visual signals. Um, and it spit me out a t-shirt design with a Phillies logo. They're not wrong. That's real Philadelphia. However, you will get sued. That is a copyright, you'll get a cease and desist from the Phillies pretty soon after you post that, right? Because that's somebody else's trademark. You can't use it in your t-shirt design. You can't monetize that. So make the work your own. Keep an eye out for other people's copyright or trademarked images and content in what you, especially in anything they're using that you're monetizing or selling in some way. And be aware of this because this is an ongoing question and not necessarily a settled area. And there are big questions, by the way, around are you able to even register a copyright or a trademark if the content is AI generated? Open question, as far as I'm aware, not a settled question. There's two other big risks that I want to make sure we talk about. So we've got accuracy, we've got, intellectual property, customer perceptions. There is a very growing backlash to artificial intelligence. And lots of customers, especially if your target customer involves folks that work in creative fields or that are creative individuals themselves, a lot of those folks are going to reject obviously AI generated content and will judge you and your business for using AI generated imagery. When they'll say things like, you should have paid an artist for this, right? And AI, as we've said before, AI generated language, especially big chunks of it that aren't edited, that are minimally edited, super easy to spot. So think about, as you're generating content, who is the content intended for? If the audience can, notices or understands that the content was AI generated, will that change their perception of it? Or will that change their perception of you or your business? Keep that in mind. In some cases, the answer is no. In other cases, the answer is absolutely. For me, I read a lot of business plans, and I can generally, as I've said, clock when they're generated with an AI. This doesn't bother me in general. If the business plan is otherwise detailed and thoughtful, and there's evidence of specific planning work, I don't care if there's AI language in it. I care that the person, put the planning effort into that business planning document. But I'm not, if I'm but if that, and this is very common, if the AI generated plan is overly broad, not very specific, pretty vague, a lot of like big talk, but not a lot of details. Okay, now that's just a problem for the business plan, right? Now I'm not sure. Now this plan doesn't seem very actionable. It doesn't seem very specific. I have concerns about the entrepreneur's ability to actually operate the business. So, some people will mind if they notice. Now remember, if you are using AI properly and you're generating in small chunks with detailed prompts and you're editing the outputs, they might not notice. And if they did notice, they won't mind because it's otherwise good content. But images, especially in videos, I don't know if you've followed the news on this the last couple of days, but there was a major artist who dropped some AI generated videos as part of an album promotion cycle. And some people are real mad about it, because this is an artist who probably could pay to have produced those videos with human, human uh, experts and human production support, and using AI generated videos is making some folks in that fan base pretty upset. So just there's examples, if you look around for them, of backlash against AI generated images and AI generated videos. There's an AI generated actress that's causing a stir. You're right, Michael. So it's not going to be necessarily a blanket positive to use generative AI, especially images and videos, if people can tell. Now, again, your audience may not care. Some audiences will. Know your customer. And this is, so many things about planning a business and operating a business come down to know your customer. All right, so that's a risk in customer perceptions. It's a real one. Bear that in mind. Give me 1 second. I've got a little bit of a cough. All right, nothing a little more coffee can't solve. All right, there are two risks I'm going to talk about next, and then we're going to wrap up this risk conversation and get into some practicing using these models. All right, environmental concerns. We had to talk about it. We had to talk about it. AI, generative AI especially, has a pretty significant environmental footprint rather. Part of this is because the training process for large AI models requires immense computational power, which means a lot of electricity, often sourced from non-renewable energy sources, and that contributes to carbon emissions. That means big data centers that are energy intensive and also rely on a lot of, drinking water to cool them. So For small businesses, adopting such technologies might inadvertently add to your carbon footprint. Um, so beyond the training phase, AI also, just the act of generating content or producing queries consumes energy, which can be significant over time, especially if you've got frequent or large scale use. The hardware required for AI, manufacturing and disposing this hardware, um, contributes to resource depletion and electronic waste. So you want to evaluate your service providers that you're selecting, not just for their costs, but also for their sustainability practices, because some companies are better than others at this. And just as you're thinking about ways to leverage AI in your business, bear in mind that each interaction uses resources. And this is going to be, I think, a larger and larger conversation, and is certainly contributing to that customer backlash that we talked about in the previous slide. And if you've noticed your energy costs increasing, that's and often attributed to data center construction and the vast amounts of energy that these data centers use, which means, which brings me to my last risk, the risk of price increases. The revenue models for the most popular AI companies right now are calibrated for market capture. They want more people using these platforms, so they are priced to incentivize you to start using them, meaning that there are free versions on the market that are pretty competitive. The ones that are paid are not priced super high because these technologies rely on energy. They are very energy intensive. The cost of energy is increasing, and it's that those energy those the cost of energy increasing is affecting every industry. It's certainly affecting AI. It is very likely that these prices will increase in the future. It may not hit all AI companies or AI models at the same time, but as we've seen with new technology over and over again, and I would point here to like YouTube, social media, streaming services, delivery apps, the prices are initially low. They're low to increase adoption, and because the companies have investor capital to fuel their growth, once we are all reliant on these services, or once these companies are actually paying for their own expenses through cash flow, prices tend to increase. So plan for prices to be higher than they are now, except for basic services. And wherever possible, find ways to minimize or to be less reliant on external companies. Great suggestion in the chat, run models on local infrastructure. That's a great idea. Just bear in mind that the prices you're paying now, don't plan for those to be the prices that you pay forever. Prices are likely to come up. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you when or by how much. I would be making a killing on the stock market if I had that information. I don't though. But just word of warning, the current pricing is unlikely to be the price that we're paying for these technologies forever. All right. So now that we've all talked about the risks and we're all super nervous, let's talk about how to actually use and get the most out of your generative AI experience by talking about prompt engineering. So there's a whole discipline, if you want to get more into this, called prompt engineering, and that's the discipline of how do we craft the right prompts to get the outputs that we want. So, and by the way, I'm happy to take questions if you have questions. I've been seeing them in the chat as they come through. Feel free to ask them in the chat or to come off mute and ask questions. And maybe I should pause for questions now before we get into this prompt engineering topic. So before we get into tips and tricks, anybody have any questions about the risks, the ethical concerns, how we're going to manage those risks, anything like that? I'm going to pause for coffee while you all think. All right. I must have done a good job. No questions. Keep them coming if you have them. So prompt engineering. This is a very basic, this is a very basic intro to prompt engineering. And there is so much more that you can learn about this if you want. There's great videos on LinkedIn Learning, YouTube, your favorite platforms. Um, but in general, with prompts, you want them to be, there's a balance between giving too much detail and taking up a lot of that, a lot of resources and tokens, risking confusing your AI and not giving enough. Err on the side of being more specific. You saw the difference between, write me a business plan for my business versus here's the kind of business I want to run and where I'm based and what my prices are and how I'm going to operate. And the more specifics you give it, the better the quality. It's fun. It can be helpful to give the AI a specific role. Hey, you're an SBA lender. If I come to you and I have a business that's this old, that has this sales and this profit, and I want to borrow this much, ask me what your concerns are. Let's talk about it. So you want to give enough context to get the result that you want. And don't be afraid to play around with it. Ask the prompt a couple of different ways. Ask it across a couple of different AI models. Michael has shared a really great in the chat, a really great format for your prompts, role, task, context, format examples. Providing examples is what we call multi-shot prompting. So let's say, I want you to write a business plan. I'm going to attach an example of a business plan, write one like this. That's one-shot prompting. I've given the AI an example to model it off of. If I give it, I want you to write an email, a sales email for my sales model to use for my sales, reps to use with new customers. Here's a couple of examples of sales emails that have worked for previous product rollouts. Draft one like this. That's multi-shot prompting. So I'm giving it a couple of prompts or a couple of examples rather to compare to. So just really quick prompt engineering. This is a thing. If you want to go down this rabbit hole, it is deep. Yeah, you've got to ask for what you want and you've got to communicate appropriately. And there is always the risk that you can give too much detail and confuse it. And I'll show you in a second what that could look like. A couple of other tips. Know your platform. Um, Especially if you get used to using a given platform, you will notice when they upgrade the AI algorithm. The shift from ChatGPT 4.0 to ChatGPT 5. You can find user forums online where people are extremely upset and extremely happy, all the ranges of emotions about that shift. Get to know the AI model that you're using. Find those user forums online to share ideas and suggestions. And, bear in mind, what does your LLM specialize in, right? If you're going to use it for code generation, is this built for code generation or is it weaker in that area? If I want it to cite me sources so I can, actually make an effort at fact checking what it's given me, can it do that? Not all of them can. So just, and this is less true now, now that most of the LLMs are up to date and sync with the wider internet. For a long time, ChatGPT would lag, 6 months or a year or more behind, the current news. So you could say, hey, how is this NFL team this season? And it would give you information from, a season and a half ago. This is less true now, but just bear in mind it's helpful, especially if you're using less popular, less mainstream AIs. How up to date is that? Are there training materials? It's a useful question. And know what your LLM or your platform specializes in, and don't be afraid to use more than one of these. Um, and I love engaging with user forums. I find when I attend a lot of these, like, how do we use AI in our small business workshops, I find some of the most useful stuff that I get out of them are just the use cases. What is everybody using AI for? And a great way to go and get a bunch of concentrated doses of that is to find a user forum for your preferred LLM. Okay, final tip. This is a Google. I think this is a Google saying, but keep a human in the loop. Let the AI do your work, not your thinking, right? Remember to keep an eye on your robot intern. Um, and for AI created content, you always got to review it thoroughly. You got to proofread it, read it for tone, for accuracy, for quality. I can't tell you how often I read an AI generated business plan and then I talk to the person and nothing in that plan was true. It happens so often and it's such a rookie mistake. Proofread it, right? I read a business plan the other week that this person was talking about, we're the premier such and such business in the greater Philadelphia area. We've got 4 locations. We have, a staff of 120. And I talked to the person and they are not yet in business. They are pre-venture. I'm like, did you read your plan? Your plan's writing a check that your business can't cash. Uh, Review it for tone, for accuracy, for quality. Read what it's putting out, right? For any task that's automated, whether that's, customer support chatbots or visual sorting, ensure there's quality controls and that outliers are escalated for human review. Any automated process, watch for drift. Automated processes that are optimized for a specific variable. Your AI model is not smart enough to change course if it's when it's appropriate or when conditions change. How many of us have fallen asleep watching YouTube and woken up to find that you're watching something completely nuts that you wouldn't have ever asked for? The AI model, the YouTube video suggestion model is optimized to keep your eyeballs. So if you're watching, it takes that as feedback. You're liking what I'm doing, I'm going to keep doing more of this. And so it can, without somebody actually giving it that input, yes, I like this video, no, I don't. It's going to drift. It's going to keep, going down in that vein. And that's how you end up, with YouTube playing something completely, completely out of left field, if you haven't been keeping up, if you haven't actually been watching what it's generating for you. And that would be an example of drift, which is a risk for any kind of optimized process. Any automated process is optimized for a specific variable. Um, Great question in the chat. I need to generate an operating model. Would you mean like an operating agreement? Is that what you mean? An operating agreement, like the legal agreement that governs your LLC? Awesome. So there are enough examples of this one. Um, you can probably find a pretty standard, pretty, boilerplate example of an operating agreement. Because it's, again, going back to how much training data is there for this, there are probably thousands of operating agreements that ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude have been trained on. So it's probably going to produce something that's pretty close to right. Make sure you're giving it enough information, right? Here's the awesome. I really like that thread. Thank you for sharing that, Tom. But you uh, make sure that you're reading through that operating agreement and that you understand everything in it, right? Again, human in the loop. Don't just copy and paste it and go with it. Make sure you're reading through it yourself. Um, and Tom just shared a GPT that is being trained on customer discovery and other startup pieces out of the Penn State Startup Advisor. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. If you've been working on your business plan through Gemini, I'm going to talk about business plans for long form content like business plans. Compose and edit in sections or chunks. Great tip, Michael. Ask for explanations. If there's sections that you don't understand, highlight those sections, drop them into that prompt and say, explain this. Why is it this way? I like using the same thread so that the model can keep all the context and remember previous prompts and responses, but don't let the thread be responsible for managing your versions. Take those chunks that it's composed and drop them into your own document, so that you're doing, you're in charge of kind of version and version control. Um, and composing in these smaller chunks gives you more control. It enables you to have more detailed prompts for specific sections, and it's always easier to spot, those kind of inaccuracies or those really AI sounding sections when you're editing in smaller chunks as well. It's always going to produce something that looks right. That's what it's trying to do. It's easier for looks right and is right to be the same if you're working in those smaller chunks. So I always suggest that approach with when you're generating any kind of long form content. And then stack platforms. If you've having trouble getting the Google video to make the clip you want, use ChatGPT to create a detailed prompt. Use Midjourney to create a character that you use VO3 to animate. Use ChatGPT to plan marketing campaigns, and then or copy that the Canva AI can create, visual collateral for using Magic Design. So stack your platforms for, kind of maximum effect, and don't be afraid, as has been suggested, to cross-check. If one AI has given you this piece of technical advice, feed that into another AI and say, how accurate is this? Um, I'll pause here to take any questions, and then we're gonna practice. All right, so any questions on those tips on how to use AI in your small business, on maybe you've been using it and you've got thoughts? I'll take questions here. Not a lot of questions.
Focus on.
All right, I'll take it. So for this next section, we can do this a couple of different ways. I want to practice this. Would you prefer to break out into smaller breakout rooms and go through, creating some content together? Or would you like to stay in this big group of 44 and do another kind of demo with a little bit more audience participation? If you want breakout rooms, give me a thumbs up. If you want to stay in the big room, give me a thumbs down. Or put it in the chat. That's fine too. Stay here. Okay, nobody wants breakout rooms. All right, I love it. Loud and clear. I got it. I asked for input. You gave me input. Thank you so much. All right, so we'll stay here. I'll bring up a couple of my large language models, and we will practice together. All right, so let me find my Zoom controls. There we go. And I'm going to share my screen. Let me find, here we go. All right. Okay, so we're back to the business plan for the t-shirt company. All right, so let's think. Okay, so we did a business plan. You saw the business plan, and you saw also that I was editing it in chunks, right? So I said, okay, here's when I did it kind of the wrong way. I just said, write a business plan. Let's see if we can do this the right way. Do we want to stick with business plans, or should we have it draft, a marketing strategy or a social media post or an onboarding plan for a new employee or something that's a little bit more useful? Are we happy with business plans? Marketing strategy or social media post? Okay. So I also want to pick up another business idea. So somebody earlier had an idea for a coffee shop. So I'm going to say, let's create a social media post announcing a social media strategy, a marketing strategy. Okay, so you're marketing expert. I'm opening a coffee shop in Philadelphia. What should my coffee shop be called? Anybody want to name my coffee shop? Okay, here we go. Give me 10 ideas for a name for a coffee shop. What do I want it to sound like? I want it to sound welcoming, um, high end, we sell artisanal roasts and a curated selection of coffee and tea drinks. Give me 10 names. Yeah, and you're using my last name. Yeah. I've heard all the business name puns with Chrome. None of them really work. Okay, so it's given me some ideas and some backup for why these ideas are nice. All right, so let's say I like harvest and pour. Okay, so this is my coffee shop. My coffee shop, harvest and pour, is opening in December. Draft a marketing plan for the next for the for November, December, and January, including um, marketing channels, posting timelines, and ideas for content and captions. Again, always bad at typing when people are watching me type. My marketing budget is about $300 a month, and I have an existing website and social media handles on Instagram, TikTok, and X. So again, the focus in these different months, focus in November is pre-launch, December the focus is the grand opening, January the focus is retention and loyalty, $150 going to paid social boosts, $100 going to local collaborations, samples and small giveaways, and $50 for print, poster, or Google local ads. Posting schedule, tactics, goals, content ideas, sample captions. So you can see it's giving us some pretty detailed plans. So let's say, give me a sample caption for that first, that pre-opening. A new kind of warmth is coming to town. What kind of image should I post for this caption? And of course, it loves the caption. It wrote the caption. And here's a couple of ideas for visuals. Maybe I have a visual I want to use. Maybe I want to create a visual. Motion teaser, a hand placing a singing mug on a wooden table. Love it. Let's talk about the visual brand. You're a brand expert. Suggest a visual brand for Harvest and Core. And remember, I didn't tell it in this prompt that it's a cafe. It remembered. It has this context window that goes up a couple of prompts, so it remembers what I'm doing. And it gave me color. It gave me, the specific hex codes for the colors it's suggesting for the color palette, typography, specific fonts, logo concept. And I could take that and give it, use the magic design to create a logo concept based on this suggestion. So now you can see I have a fair amount of stuff created. Oh, yes, please. Create that mood board. And let's see what it does. So again, none of these prompts are terribly complex. And I've jumped around a little bit in what I'm looking for. I went from the broader plan into more specifics. I've got a post. What should that post look like? What should my visual design look like? See, so I'm getting it to get more specific, and it's going to take a second to create the visuals. Visuals take longer. Let's compare this to what I would get if I worked with Claude. I've got Claude open right here. Hello, Claude, wake up. Are you awake? Same prompt, right? Exact same prompt. We're going to see what it's going to do. Meanwhile, let's check in on that visual mood board. Oh, still cooking, still cooking. All right. Let's see what Claude gave us. So Claude suggests, again, same split, social ads, grand opening materials, influencer partnerships, paid social ads in December, momentum. Gave me very similar suggestions here in terms of the goals, what platforms to engage on, website updates, add a timer, I like that suggestion. And here's a content calendar. And it gave me, captions and it even put in blank days, blanks for things like it doesn't know, date, neighborhood, those elements of the business that I haven't told it yet. So those are placeholders, which is great. I love this equipment arrival to announce, specific milestones during your build out, building buzz for the launch, meet your baristas, grand opening details. So this is a little bit more in depth, especially with a content calendar than what ChatGPT gave me. I like this better personally. So, and I'm using the free version of Claude. I don't pay for Claude. This is just the free version, and I think it's really solid, especially with the specificity of the captions and the suggestions. But let's go back over to ChatGPT. Okay, here's the mood board. So you can see it's that visual palette. It's the font it's suggested. It's, neutrals, beiges, warm cinnamon, all those kinds of colors. So now I have kind of a visual aesthetic to guide what I'm doing. And I've got two different marketing strategies and marketing plans. I like the Claude. I think it's more specific and more useful. And and it spelled everything correctly. Absolutely. And before I used any of these, let's say I wanted to use this, I wanted to use this caption suggestion. I want to, talk about, I want to, complete the caption. There's a lot of stuff that is different here that there's placeholders. So I want to, I wouldn't want to just copy and paste this right into Claude. Claude up here, Claude, Claude, like the name. Yeah. All right. So that's my, these are some of and there's lots of other large language models. Gemini is a popular one. That's the Google Copilot, which is the Microsoft one. There's tons of these. And I'm using ChatGPT 5, which is, I think, the most recent paid GPT. Um, all right, so again, this is just a basic idea. Let's say I want to go in a totally different direction. Let's say I want to, okay, I'm hiring my first barista, draft an onboarding checklist to make sure I'm compliant with local labor laws and providing adequate training, onboarding checklist, and 2 weeks of training schedules. And again, I haven't told it where I'm based, so it's not going to give me anything specific to Philadelphia. And if it did, I would want to fact check that with my local small business development center. We're here. Give us a call because it's not going to get everything right, but it'll give you some basics. So you want to have an offer letter. You want to verify the employment eligibility with the I-9. You need to get a W-4 tax form, assuming they're a W-2 employee. If you have an employee handbook, you want them to sign it. Payroll setup, emergency contact, health and safety documents. Do they have the food handler certification? Have we gone over the dress code? And then day one orientation, then here's that 2-week training schedule with the key activities and the goals of each of them to make sure that I'm training this person well and that they're ready to go when we open. And I could have this come out in a packet. Question in the chat, did I create the images in Claude or ChatGPT 5? I created the image in ChatGPT 5. All right. And then it's given me a little assessment I can do at the end of 2 weeks to make sure that they're pulling espresso properly and steaming the milk right, and that the drinks are made accurately and efficiently. How is customer? So all these things that I might want to evaluate a new hire on, it's already created that checklist for me. And then some considerations for labor law and compliance for a small cafe. So this is a nice little handy. I would know, I would feel a lot more comfortable hiring this person, knowing that I know how I'm going to train them. And let's say, I could also ask it to help me, schedule shifts for my new hires and things. But I think you've gotten the idea now. I'm going to stop wasting resources and go back to you all. Now you've seen how I would use this if I were opening a cafe. All right, let me come back to my slideshow. All right, so what worked about that? Do you think the longer prompts are always better? Just some questions to kind of talk about how that went. Um, and I think we did this as we were going through, ways to improve this, ways to use this better. Um, but in general, I just want to share. I don't think I think there is a point of diminishing return on the length of prompts. I think long prompts generally, longer is generally better than very brief, but you can go too long. And I guess I'm gonna demo this. Let me go back and demo this. All right. Um, so I'm gonna overload it with context. I'm gonna open a new chat and I'm sharing the wrong screen. Ba -ba -ba -ba. All right, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to use that's the wrong window. Don't share that window, Isabel. That's just my Outlook. Okay, let me find it. Here we go. Okay, so let's say I'm opening a coffee shop called Harvest and Pour in Philadelphia, and I'm hiring two baristas. Our visual brand is warm, comforting neutrals, and serif fonts will be based in on Passyunk Ave in South Philly. Um, dra we're active on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Suggest draft me um, an email to my landlord asking about planning logistics for our grand opening. And I've given it a lot of information. So nothing too wrong here. Sometimes if you give it, I don't really have time to give it more info, but you can absolutely give it too much context. Sometimes if if you include like one, if you include one detail that's not relevant, it'll kind of fix it on that detail. I thought it might, for instance, focus on that visual brand side. It hasn't in this, so that's going quite well. But just you can overload it. You can give it too much info in your prompts. I think it's kind of difficult to go too far in that direction, but it's very possible. So finally, um, not quite enough time to go into this in depth, but this is a business model canvas. I like this as an exercise to identify any of these areas where there is either rote work, which can be automated, content creation, which can be AI assisted, or data generated, which can be AI analyzed. So this might be a good place to start if you're thinking about how will I use this in my business. Come back to your business model canvas and identify, are there any of these areas where I could utilize these AI models to improve the efficiency, the productivity, the quality of the business. All right. Last objectives. Understand, so this is what we were trying to do. Understand the essentials of what powers generative AI, identify risks around AI usage and learn how to manage them, leave with at least one viable use case for your business. How did we do, everybody? Did we accomplish our learning objectives, in your opinion? Yes, no, maybe, not at all? Okay, good overview. All right, awesome. I'm going to put a survey link in the chat. Um, And if you have questions, I'm here to answer them. But for now, thank you very much for joining us. Let us know how we did in the chat. There's a lot of great back and forth in the chat today. So thank you all for that. It was wonderful to meet you all and talk more about generative AI. If you're interested in becoming a client of the SBDC, um, and you probably received a welcome email when you signed up that included a link to schedule a new client intake conversation with one of our consultants. That information will be in the follow-up message, the follow-up email for this conversation, but if you haven't engaged with us in a one-on-one way, it begins with a new client intake conversation with one of our consultants, and there should be a link to schedule one of those in your inbox either already when you first signed up or in the next couple of days as the follow-up to this webinar. Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure to speak with you all. I encourage you, this survey really helps us. We want to know how we did. It's like 3 questions long, takes no time at all. Please fill it out. And I'll be here if you have questions. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your week. All right. All right. No questions. Wonderful. Thank you all for joining. I will hopefully talk to you individually at some point and maybe see you in a webinar again soon.
Actually, I do have a quick question. Will
Sure.
this recording be available to us via email or no?
Great question. I believe we're going to share the recording. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
sure. All right.